I'll say that again because I don't think you heard it. If you want to argue that Hamas is responsible for Israel killing innocent civilians, you're in the same intellectual and moral space as people who argue that Israel is responsible for Hamas killing innocent Israeli civilians.
Why? On what basis?
I'm going to leave you to think about that. I'm going to leave you to think about that, Johnny.
What happens when someone who thinks they're being reasonable suddenly runs out of logic to stand on? Because you've seen this type before. We all have. The self-described moderate, the calm voice, the one who insists they're balanced, fair, rational, especially when it comes to defending Israel. They lean on words like democracy, accountability, rule of law. It sounds measured, it sounds thoughtful, it even sounds convincing at first. But here's the real question. What happens when those carefully constructed talking points collide with reality? Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because in this clip, that so-called moderate position is about to be stress-tested in real time, and not gently, but with relentless, uncomfortable logic. What you're about to witness is a caller who walks in believing he can defend Israel from a reasonable standpoint, separating the idea of the country from the actions of its government. That's the key distinction he wants to maintain. That's the line he needs to hold. But there's just one problem. The moment you start applying real-world examples, actual events, actual consequences, that line begins to blur, fast. And as the pressure builds, you can literally hear the shift happening, the hesitation, the contradictions, the slow collapse of a position that sounded solid in theory but doesn't survive contact with reality. Because when you can no longer rely on accountability being enforced, when the very thing you use to justify your support starts to fall apart, you're left with a choice. Either question what you support, or start defending things you never thought you would. And that's exactly where this is heading. Watch closely, because this isn't just a debate, it's a turning point.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I'm a supporter of Israel personally, and what they're trying to do.
Oh, that's where we part.
That's where we part. Well, I'll say the following: for any Israeli or any soldier that's shot anyone indiscriminately, and certainly a civilian, they should be held accountable. And there are cases, many cases in Israel, where there have been terrorists who have been disarmed, and then someone in the IDF has gone and shot them still, and they have been put in prison in Israel. That's what happens. So the fact that and I'm not sure, to be honest with you,
I don't quite understand what you've just told me. You can take all the time you want, Johnny. There's no rush.
Okay, thank you.
You're talking about terrorists in Israel.
In Israel, there have been cases where terrorists in Israel have been shooting, and Israeli soldiers have been present and disarmed them, and then another soldier has gone and shot that terrorist, and that person from the IDF has been held accountable.
Yes, but that's in Israel.
Put in prison. No, my point is
that's in Israel, where everyone can see it happening.
Correct.
Because there's no journalist banned. There's no journalist banned from Israel, so you wouldn't be able to sweep that under the carpet, would you? But in Gaza,
I'm with you. I'm with you. My point is that if someone has shot and killed a civilian, or in this case, Israeli civilians, and they were the IDF that's done it, and they have no justification and had no threat towards them, they should be held accountable. But when we look at the situation as a whole,
I'm going to have to be a little bit strict with you, and I hope you appreciate that that's fair. But you can't say I support something because I believe that something should happen. You can only support it if that thing is happening.
Correct. I agree.
And it's not.
All I'm saying is
it's not happening. They're not being held accountable. Nearly half of the air-to-ground munitions that Israel has used in Gaza have been unguided. They're literally called dumb bombs. There's no control or discretion over where they land at all.
There is discretion. They've been warning civilians to move from one side to the other side, and Hamas not allowing them to move from one side to the other side because they want as much. There's
no evidence of that, of them being prevented.
There's no evidence of Israel warning.
No, there's no evidence of people being prevented from moving. But even if there was, then telling people of a specific ethnicity to move out of their homes is pretty close to ethnic cleansing, isn't it?
Why is that the case if they've got Hamas terrorists hiding in their homes and
there's no Hamas terrorists in the Holy Church complex.
How do you know? I'm interested. You know
because
that.
the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem said so, and they'll be in daily contact with the people who've been shot dead.
They weren't there either. It's in a church in Gaza.
So then you've got some people. Then you've got people in direct contact with the Christians in that complex saying there are no belligerents here, and then people like you, with respect, Johnny. No, I won't wait a sec. I won't wait a sec because we can't keep spouting from one position to another. You can't keep saying they should be held accountable. They are not being held accountable, which means that your grounds for supporting what is happening have disappeared from beneath your feet in the course of a single... I know you disagree, but I'm just telling you what everyone else can hear.
Let me explain why. The general goal of what Israel are trying to do is they have to carry that out. If you had Hamas on your border sending rockets for the last 17 years to you, you'd also realise that they have to.
So there we are. So you are supportive of everything, including two women being shot dead by snipers.
No, because not at all. If particularly Israeli soldiers have gone wrong and done something wrong, that doesn't mean the whole general cause is a question at all. The general cause.
Well, what do you think a war crime is?
A war crime. There could be a war crime. This particular instance.
But that wouldn't affect the general cause, though. So how many war crimes do you think would affect the general cause?
I don't know. It's a good question. But on the whole, 90% of what they're doing is trying to get back.
They were shot in cold blood inside the premises of the parish where there are no belligerents. 3 Israeli hostages shot dead, waving white flags, having taken their shirts off. So what is it that you are? What is it that you think you are supporting when you ring in to me today?
I'm supporting the eradication of Hamas, and I'm supporting.
Well, how's that going?
Hostages. What? Pretty well. I think there's probably 20,000, 30,000 Hamas soldiers or whatever they're called, terrorists, and they're probably doing quite well in getting rid of them. At the same time, they're trying to free up the hostages. One thing I don't understand.
But all we know about the hostages in the last 48 hours is that the Israeli Defense Force shot 3, and the wider analysis of the pursuit of Hamas leaders is considerably less optimistic than yours. Although I appreciate you weren't expected to be asked about it. So we can't claim that what is happening in the church compound in Gaza, or we can't claim that the oldest mosque in the area, the Omari Mosque, 5th century Byzantine church, which was destroyed earlier this month, St. Porphyrius' church, the oldest in Gaza, damaged in another strike in October, displaced people there, 57 disabled people in this compound, which was set on fire. They've now lost electricity. None of that can be justified on the grounds of trying... Let me finish, please. Let me finish. None of that can be...
It can be, and we've seen Hamas terrorists...
None of that can be justified.
In all of these places.
So if Hamas are hiding in a building full of disabled people, you support Israel bombing that building and killing everyone in it? So what do you support, Johnny?
To fight those Hamas people.
So what do you support?
The British did the same thing. Everyone, this is war.
And that's why the Geneva Convention was invented, to stop them from doing it again. So here is a building full of disabled people. You think there might be some Hamas people hiding in it, even though there is no proof, and everybody there... I'm going to finish, Johnny, and everybody there says there isn't, and you support bombing it and killing everyone in it. As long as when it turns out there were no terrorists in there, as long as everybody is held to account, Johnny. Am I right?
How do we know? How do you know there are no Hamas terrorists? We've seen them hiding in schools, in churches. We've seen it.
So you are. Why are you arguing with me? So you do support bombing a building full of disabled people because there might be some Hamas terrorists in there?
I don't. I support I support trying to shoot terrorists within a building like that. Otherwise, you could say... Otherwise,
the Patriarchate said that earlier on Saturday, an Israeli tank fired on part of the church compound with 54 disabled people inside. It caused a fire that destroyed the building's generator, the only source of electricity, and some of the disabled people can no longer use their respirators.
That's very sad. It's a terrible,
Isn't
tragic...
it just, Johnny? It is indeed.
But whose responsibility is... Who started it? Was Israel firing on Hamas on the 6th of October?
The person that fired the tank is responsible for that.
No,
and that
one's
people that
complaining
fired the
about
guns on
that.
October the 7th are responsible for what they did. But if you want to argue that Hamas is responsible for what Israel is doing, then you put yourself in the same intellectual position as the people who argue that Israel is responsible for what Hamas did.
Are totally responsible for what they do, because before Hamas went into these
I'll say that again because I don't think you heard it. If you want to argue that Hamas is responsible for Israel killing innocent civilians, you're in the same intellectual and moral space as people who argue that Israel is responsible for Hamas killing innocent Israeli civilians.
Why? On what basis?
I'm going to leave you to think about that. I'm going to leave you to think about that, Johnny.
This wasn't just a caller getting dismantled on live radio. This was something much bigger. What you just watched is what happens when a moderate position collides with a reality it can't explain. Because Johnny didn't start extreme. He started where a lot of people start, with that familiar line, if wrongdoing happens, it should be investigated, people should be held accountable. That's the moral safety net. That's what makes the support feel justified. But here's the problem. That argument only works if accountability actually exists. The moment real examples are introduced, sniper fire, civilian deaths, indiscriminate strikes, and there's no clear accountability to point to, the entire framework begins to fall apart, and you could hear it happening in real time. The hesitation, the contradictions, the shift. And this is what some people now call the Netanyahu effect. When the actions of a government become so difficult to defend, even its moderate supporters are pushed into a corner, and in that corner, there are only two options left. Either you step back and question what you support, or you double down and start justifying things you would have rejected before. And that's exactly what happened here. The accountability argument disappeared, and in its place came something much harder, a willingness to defend outcomes at almost any cost, because the alternative would mean admitting the original position no longer holds. And we're seeing more of this pattern play out, not just in one conversation, but across wider media discussions. Nuance starts to disappear, positions become more rigid, and the middle ground, it slowly vanishes. Johnny wasn't unique. He was just a very clear example of what that shift looks like when it happens in real time. So now the question turns to you. Where do you stand on this? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.